Hello, everyone. I'm Melory Johnson, 25-year beauty veteran, consultant, and strategist. Welcome back to Pretty Equity, where we examine the real infrastructure of beauty, where science, execution, and risk determine whether brands scale or break. Today, we're going to explore ingredients, because skincare is not about finding one miracle active. It's about how skin works and how formulators design systems that interact with the skin safely, effectively, and consistently. Most people look at an ingredient list and assume the story is in the headline ingredient. But in reality, performance comes from formulation architecture, stability, delivery systems, ingredient interactions, and the biology of the skin itself. So today we're going to break down how skincare actually works from the inside out. I'm excited to be joined once again by our friend, cosmetic chemist extraordinaire, may I say, Mark Broussard. Mark, welcome back. I'm thrilled you could join us again. Before we dive in, I want to ground the audience in a misconception that shows up constantly in beauty marketing. Most consumers, and frankly, many founders, have been taught to think of skin like a sponge. You see this language everywhere. Your skin absorbs what you put on it. This serum sinks deep into the skin. Think of your skin like a sponge. It soaks up nutrients, and so on and so on and so on. Even ingredient descriptions reinforce this idea. We hear things like certain molecules act like a sponge, push ingredients deep into the skin, deliver the actives, opening the pores. The problem is that's not what the skin is designed to do. Human skin barrier is exactly that. It's a barrier. The skin is a barrier organ. Its primary job is protection. In other words, keeping water in and foreign substances out. Absorption is the exception, not the rule. And when absorption does happen, it's highly dependent on molecular size, chemistry, formulation, and the condition of the skin itself. Why does this matter? Because when brands oversimplify skin as something that drinks in ingredients, it leads to overstated performance claims, misunderstanding of what topical products can realistically do, poor formulation decisions, and for investors, inflated expectations around differentiation and efficacy. So before we talk about specific ingredients, delivery systems, or trends, it's important to reset the foundation. So Mark, can you explain at a high level for viewers who may not already have this knowledge, what the skin barrier is and what it's actually designed to do?
As you stated, the skin barrier is a protective barrier, and that is to protect the body from exposure to things out in the ecosystem. So, dirt, microorganisms, etc. The whole function of the skin is to prevent anything from penetrating, mostly anything from penetrating into the epidermis. So that's the basic function of the skin as a protective mechanism. The skin is comprised of various layers of different types of cells. And if you think of a stack of bricks, for instance, you may have a scaffold, not just one thing. It's actually, four or five different layers of different types of cells that comprise the skin itself. So yes, fundamentally, it's protective mechanism.
Now, regarding that biologically misleading skin sponge narrative, when a brand claims their product penetrates deeply, What should people understand about how difficult that actually is biologically?
First thing is the size of the active molecule itself. And I'll take, for example, collagen cream. So you see a lot of collagen creams on the market. Well, collagen is too large of a molecule to actually penetrate the epidermis. It will just sit on the skin and metabolize. So that's one misperception. The other misperception is that, one misperception is collagen can actually penetrate into the skin and interact with biology. The second misperception is that adding collagen topically is going to increase or enhance collagen in the skin. It won't. The skin has a specific biological pathway by which it produces native collagen and elastin. And the only way to get more collagen and elastin formation is to use molecules that will interact with the biology, the biological pathway, to stimulate your skin to produce more. So
Hmm.
just putting collagen on top of your skin is not going to do anything. So that's a good example. So one is the size of the molecule. Uh, Two is kind of the structure activity relationship of the molecule, the shape of the molecule. Be with the outer layer of the skin. Can it actually penetrate? And that really doesn't happen for a whole lot of active.
Mm, mm,
So that's probably the biggest misperception from consumers is putting something topically is automatically going to increase the amount of collagen in your skin. It will not.
No, absolutely. And we're going to talk more about collagen in a bit as well. But that's always a good example because it really is one that people truly misunderstand. But for the audience, this is something I want to emphasize. A skincare product is not an ingredient. It is a formula. And although I know we've all heard this before, it's important that we truly understand what formula means. So, Mark, from a chemist's perspective, what does it actually mean to formulate a product versus just adding actives into a base, like following a recipe in a kitchen?
Mhm. Yeah, you start off with the intended effect of the formula, right? The combination of ingredients. So let's stick with native elastin and collagen formation. If I'm developing a serum and I want to um, increase collagen, have something that will increase collagen, increase elastin, I'm looking at individual molecules, individual ingredients that are going to interact in that pathway. So, for instance, I'll start off with niacinamide, copper tripeptide, tripeptide 29, which are the amino acid building blocks of collagen and elastin, and use those. And they're all small molecules that can penetrate the epidermis. So I know they will interact with the biology if I can get them past the epidermis and into the dermis. So that's the first consideration: or what is the objective of the formula, uh, and what ingredients are you going to use to stimulate that biological response? The next consideration is, since the skin is pretty, an impermeable barrier for all practical purposes, how do I get those actives into past the epidermis into the dermis where they can interact with biology? So you're looking at a product is a system, and you're going to have different components of that system that are going to perform different functions. One, you want to preserve the stability of the active molecules that will interact with the biology. And we'll talk about some of those mechanisms of, liposomes, nanosomes, encapsulation technologies that protect the active from degradation and also help facilitate the active penetrating into the past the epidermis. So once you select your actives that are going to work together in a collaborative fashion with the biology to achieve the desired effect, now you're going to consider how do you get into the skin, and then you get down past that into delivery systems or penetration enhancers, and then of course the skin sensorial to make a nice product. So it's a it's a cascade of considerations as you're building a product.
So, continuing on this theme of systems, for the audience who are new to beauty, a cosmetic product usually consists of the following parts that many have heard of but don't really understand. Things like solvents, emulsifiers, preservatives, pH adjusters, stabilizers, penetration enhancers, like you just mentioned, Mark. So, for clarity, what are the invisible parts of a formula that most people never think about? And why do they matter as much as the hero ingredient itself?
Yeah, the ingredient, I personally don't like that term very much because there's no one ingredient that a silver bullet that's going to do all the work. So as I talked about, all of the supporting cast, right, of components of a formula uh, are all designed to help drive that hero ingredient or that active ingredient, and it's never just one ingredient, but they are designed to keep it stable, uh, and try to help it penetrate the epidermis. So basically, everything else are all critical and important components of a formula, right?
Mm.
So for consumers who look at it from the perspective of a hero ingredient,
Yeah.
so uh, uh, talking about hero ingredients, a common consumer misperception because of the way cosmetics are marketed is that there is an ingredient, a quote unquote hero ingredient that will do all the work. And that's to simplify the marketing message. In reality, it's multiple ingredients in a formula that are going to perform and do the work. So you may have a hero ingredient, but it needs a supporting cast. You have components in the formula that enhance stability. You have components in the formula that can help penetrate the epidermis or facilitate penetrating the epidermis. You may have encapsulation technologies to protect that ingredient from degradation. Because if you put a product on the skin and the ingredients that need to interact with the biology to achieve an effect are unable to penetrate the epidermis, they're just going to metabolize on the surface of the skin, and the product really won't do very much at all.
Mm.
So it, everything's important. When you're formulating, you have to formulate very intentionally, or at least that's the way I like to do it. Formulate very intentionally by including only ingredients that support the intended function of the product. So if it's stimulating native collagen and elastin production, I will select a very particular set of ingredients that I know interact with that biology. That's step one. Step two is how do I get them past the epidermis so that they can interact with the biology, and that's defines your formula from that point forward.
Mm. Okay, so let's just carry on this, this thought here. And talk
Yeah.
about another misunderstanding in skincare, and that's, that the more actives you have, the better your results will be. But ingredients they interact. They can destabilize each other. They can cause skin irritation. So, Mark, what are the most common ways ingredients interfere with each other inside a formula?
One may neutralize another. Uh, uh, they may just steam, for instance. Some ingredients will destabilize the emulsion. So you try to, create an emulsion, create a cream, and there's some component of it that interferes with that emulsification process. I have a saying, and it's kind of a philosophy, and that is every formula is perfect on paper until you try to make it. And a lot of times, those ingredient interactions will manifest themselves in your first attempt to make that formula, to make a prototype of that formula. So you experiment a lot, and sometimes you're taken by surprise as to the way the ingredients interact and the way some may destabilize. Um, so in formulating, the way I go about it is I add one ingredient, I lay out my formula, I add one ingredient at a time, and I'm observing after each individual ingredient addition, is it how is it interacting with the components that came before it? And that helps you pinpoint if you have ingredient incompatibilities. It helps you pinpoint which ingredient is causing the incompatibility. It's pretty common when you're putting together a formula that you'll experience this as you're going through the process. Then you go back to the drawing board and start over again. But you'll you'll notice these things at 2 points: when you're making the first couple of prototypes, and then when you're going through stability testing. So that's where these ingredient incompatibilities will be most evident.
Okay, so you would say
The
it's so, Mark, would it be fair to say that in formulation, it's as much about what you exclude as what you include? Because I'm sure, talking of incompatibilities, that there's going to be a time where you're going to have to look at what can't go into a formula.
Correct. Yes, that's exactly the case. Um, Cosmetic chemistry is like turning chemistry on its head. The whole idea of cosmetic chemistry is you do want ingredients to interact with each other, right? In traditional chemistry, you put ingredients together specifically because you want. So here you're looking for those kind of incompatibilities, so that your ingredients are not interacting. They are present in their most stable format, and a lot of times you have to make trade-offs in considering ingredients. They may have um, pH stability incompatibilities. One ingredient might be most stable at pH 3.5, and you're trying to blend it in with another ingredient that's more stable at pH 6.8. That's a pretty big gap in the pH range. So you have to make those judgment calls as to what ingredients will mix together, and which ones you really should probably stay away from.
Mm, mm. So, okay, so let's pivot here for a second and talk about my favorite topic, delivery systems. Okay, so continuing on, the key ingredient path, and let's talk about what actually matters here, and that's delivery. And I know that you touched on it earlier, and you spoke a little bit about some of the delivery mechanisms, but um, if an ingredient is real, it has to reach the right place in the skin, in the right form, and at the right dose, right? Otherwise, what's the point, right? What's the point? But most consumers and many founders as well don't realize that a skincare formula isn't just about actives or even the formula itself, which can look great on paper, exactly like you said. but it's the
Hmm.
system that carries them that is the crux.
Yeah.
So Mark, keeping it simple here, what do we
Hmm.
mean when we talk about delivery systems in skincare, and why does it determine whether an active works?
Sure. I guess the best analogy to that is if you can, you encapsulate actives to protect them from pH changes, from light, from oxidation in water, et cetera. So that's the first component of it is forming a protective shell around that ingredient. The next component of it is getting it past the epidermis so that it actually gets into past the epidermis into the dermis where it can then be released, right? And in its native form interact with the biology, right? It will have a natural function of biology. So the the best analogy I can think of is a pregnant woman. The fetus is protected within in time it is delivered, and during that gestation period, it is protected within the womb environment. So it's kind of the same concept with ingredients that you want to create that encapsulation that protects it and then facilitates it penetrating the epidermis. So there are a wide variety of delivery systems that you can use. Um, the most crude are just plain penetration enhancers, and that would be like dimethyl isosorbide or oleic acid. These just literally disrupt the skin barrier, kind of like poking a hole in it. They disrupt the skin barrier so the ingredient can pass through. The next level would be liposomes, where the active ingredient is again encapsulated. If you think of it in a ball, right, it's an outer shell surrounding the ball, um, and those are cholesterol based liposomes. Those will help protect and facilitate some penetration. And then you can get into something more sophisticated like niasomes, deformable niasomes. And again, that is a phosphatidylcholine outer shell with some edge activators. And if you think of those in the context of a lava lamp. Remember the lava lamps with the blobs that come up and then change shape as they're rising to the surface? Well, niasomes would be like a lava lamp. And that's why they're called deformable niasomes. They protect, but then they're shape shifters. They can change shape as required when they are in contact with the epidermis to try and snake their way in between the layers, right? Um, and then more recently, I've started working with the micellar delivery systems. Same concept. You use surfactants, non-ionic surfactants, and they again form a protective layer around the active and can help the active uh, the epidermis. So it's a function of size, compatibility, protection, etc. So it that is a field that's really coming into the cosmetic space from the pharma industry, where they've been working on various types of delivery systems for decades.
Yeah, we're actually gonna start talking about some of these more advanced delivery systems in a little bit. But I mean, basically what you're saying is that all of this stuff, whether it's polymer systems or microemulsions, or even time release technologies, which we're starting to see now in beauty, are actually legitimate science. They're not just marketing language.
No, no, those are legitimate science. Yeah, yeah. And those are probably, you know, equally important uh, to the what do they call it? The hero ingredient, right? Or hero ingredients, right? Because a
Mhm.
hero ingredient that just degrades on the top of the skin isn't doing very much. You've got to get it into the skin.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Look, I mean, all of this is about solving problems, right? The problem is the skin doesn't want to
Yes,
do what you want it to do. Now we have to make it. So,
correct.
all of these different
Yes,
systems are there to help us solve a problem. Okay, so I want to just
yes.
pause here quickly and just pull back the curtain for our new to beauty viewers. Formulation isn't just about mixing ingredients, it's physical chemistry, right? And I'm sure you've picked up on
Mhm.
that by now. But with that said, Mark, can you explain high level? Let's talk about something like HLB, the hydrophilic lipophilic balance. I think that's what it stands for, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, because
yes.
you hear that term being thrown around a lot. So talk to me high level about what is HLB.
Uh, HLB is a system that was designed to be used with ethoxylated emulsifiers. And most people talk about HLB as though it applies to all emulsifiers, but it was a system very specifically developed for ethoxylated emulsifiers. And with HLB, you're doing calculations that are really straightforward of the proper amount for certain oils, carrier oils that you're including in a formula, the proper amount and ratio of the emulsifiers that you're using to create the emulsion. So it's a guide towards uh, towards properly formulating an emulsion to kind of get the best stability that you possibly can. Uh, I personally don't use very much because I don't find it to be helpful uh, or accurate because these are all kind of just guesstimates. But that's what you're trying to do with HLB.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, in plain language, it is a system to try to optimize the amount of oils and the emulsifiers in a cream.
Okay, so for those new to the audience, what you're basically saying is that HLB is part of how formulators decide whether something sits in oil, sits in water, or can actually be carried through the formula correctly, right? Whether it's oil or water.
Yeah, yes. How it
Okay,
can be formula? It's a way to optimize the uh, percentage of the emulsifiers and percentage of the carrier oils,
okay,
leading to the theoretically leading to the most stable cream, right?
okay, okay. All right, that makes sense. Okay, so indulge me here for a little bit. Let's talk about
Sure.
futuristic terms. Unless there's something else you wanted to say. You sound
No,
like
no, go ahead.
okay, okay.
We're
Let's
good.
talk a little futuristic here, because we're hearing a lot about nano delivery, lipid nanoparticles, advanced carriers, right? And these systems are used in pharma today, as you had alluded to a little earlier, and even in nutraceutical science. But there,
Mhm.
you know, um, are there nanoscale delivery approaches that are legitimately being used in skincare today?
Yeah, people who are using the approach of liposomes in some instances, niasomes, and the micellar delivery systems. You're trying to get the think of them as a particle, right? You're trying to get that particle size down to 20, 30 nanometers. And again, getting an active past the epidermis into the skin is a function of size, right? So getting it down to nano levels is very important, because if you have a delivery system, but it's producing particle sizes that are in and of themselves too large to penetrate the epidermis, what's the point, right? You just do not have it in there. So the answer is yes, yes. It's currently, those technologies are currently being used in the industry, and I think they're just going to get better and better over time.
Look, I mean, it's 2026, Mark. I mean, you would imagine that these types of technologies would become the norm, but they aren't. And is it because of practical limitations, safety, regulation, price, efficacy? What's going on there? Why is this not the norm today?
That's more a function, I think, of cost than anything else. If you are going to include a or retinol in caprylic capric triglyceride, which is how it normally is delivered to you as a formulator, and then incorporate it into the product. Um, and you compare the price of that to an encapsulated retinol, you're looking at a pretty substantial difference in price. So that is largely driven by product positioning in the marketplace, the brand, their brand strategy. What price points are they able to offer their products to consumers to? So that you'll normally see the encapsulation technologies and delivery systems incorporated into higher end luxury slash prestige slash um, performance products or clinical product lines. So that's where they're primarily being used, because the whole emphasis there on performance
Mm.
versus a $25 retinol cream that's just going to have the retinol delivered into the cream itself with no encapsulation.
No, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. And you know what? I think it's like that across the board with, whatever technology we were talking about. Whenever a technology is new, or newer, the price point is usually higher until it becomes, you know what I mean, more commonplace. And then, we seem to,
Yes.
find that the price comes down. But let's carry on with our science frontier because I have a fun question that I want to ask you. Okay, just throwing this out there. Okay, Mark, if you had a magic wand, right, and you could design your ideal delivery system, anything your chemist heart desires, and you were going to make the perfect product, what would it look like to you? What would that even if it's something that doesn't exist yet, what would that
Mm-hmm.
ideal system look like from your perspective?
Oh, from my perspective, if someone came up with a technology that achieves both encapsulation, protection, and facilitates delivery with a timed release payload into the dermis, that would be perfect. I'd be very happy with something like that. Now, that's really difficult to achieve because you're trying to do multiple things all at the same time. But that would kind of be an ideal for me if you had a technology like that worked multiple actives, that was very simple. Just drop the actives in a base, start up, it protects and then penetrates and everything else. That would be perfect.
Well, Mark, you never know who's listening to this, which is why I threw that out there because you might get some juices flowing, with that. But yes, I would imagine that would be a pretty complicated problem to solve there, especially with adding the time release onto
Yes.
that as well. But
Yes.
realistically though, what do you think the future of delivery looks like? if we could solve the barrier problem more elegantly, realistically, not, not in our ideal
Yeah,
out there world.
yeah. I think um, realistically, you can get certain actives past the epidermis to interact with biology. So uh, I think right now, uh, the most promising looking technologies in my mind are the deformable niosomes, which are fairly easy to make, and the micellar delivery systems. Again, show some good promise. There are drawbacks to both. You also you have to consider irritancy, etc. And when you're using surfactants, then you have a system more prone to irritancy. So balancing those two, but I think at the moment, from what I've been researching, those are the two most promising approaches.
Mm, mm. No, interesting. I mean, look, I think delivery systems as a whole is a very interesting topic. And I think it's something that I don't hear people talking about it much. Even though,
Mhm.
from a diligence standpoint, it is an extremely important point because brands often market the active when in fact the real differentiator is whether the brand actually understands the delivery architecture. So,
That's correct. Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Anyone can put an active into a formula, right?
yeah,
Anybody can do that.
yeah,
Getting it past the epidermis, not everybody can do that,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
Well,
that
yeah, I
that
mean,
that
no,
yeah,
100%.
that
I mean,
architecture is everything.
And two products can claim the same ingredients, but only one of them is going to perform. You know what I mean? It's
Correct.
on paper it looks like the same. You know what I mean? Pretty much the same formula. Um, but the conversation we should be having in R&D diligence anyway, in my opinion, should be around delivery systems because in the end, that is what will determine your product's true performance. Okay. So, Mark,
Yes.
moving away from the basics, the skin, understanding delivery systems, blah, 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 let's talk about what we're actually here to talk about, and that's ingredients. So
Sure.
for a lot of the ingredients we're about to talk about, they're not actually a thing. They're a category, right? And so, talking of categories, let's start with the one that most people hear on a daily basis, and that's peptides, right? Because peptides are a perfect example of an ingredient category where delivery determines everything. Oh, and for those who missed it,
Mm.
peptides are not a thing. They're an entire category. So, Mark, can you help us understand what exactly peptides are and why there are so many different types? Because, everybody
Yeah.
has heard them. They're literally everywhere today. But I don't think people actually understand what they are.
Basically, peptides are short chains of amino acids that are combined. They're small molecules. They can penetrate the epidermis, and they do interact with the biology. Okay, so that's the most basic thing about peptides. Um, when you're designing a peptide formula, various peptides do different things. So you have the Botox-like peptides, and that's argireline, for instance, is the most famous in that class, and it will induce myofascial relaxation. So wrinkles come from using your muscle a lot. Muscles are stretching the skin, tightening the skin, stretching the skin, tightening the skin. So with myofascial relaxation, you're just kind of interfering with that process, right? The muscles don't they're still being used, but maybe not as much. So prior to application of that peptide. So when you think think about peptides, you think of a system. So you start off with myofascial relaxation. The next component are a class of peptides that are signaling peptides. And they're kind of like, if you think of a red light, a traffic signal. They are going to signal to the cells to produce different components, right? So they may signal to the cells to produce collagen, maybe signal to the cells to produce more elastin, for instance. So you've got those signaling peptides. You've got peptides that will affect the biology to perform different functions. So you may have some peptides that are skin lightening peptides that will inhibit melanin synthesis, for instance. So when you typically look at a peptide formula, you'll see multiple peptides listed in there. And it's because you're layering the functions of the peptide to create a complete system. So if you look at a formula that only has one peptide in it, don't buy it because it's only going to do one thing, right? But if you look at a formula and you've got myofascial relaxation, then you have collagen, and the core building blocks like tetrapeptide 29 are the core building blocks, amino acids. There you're going to have a better formula, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's why there are a lot of them. They're not terribly difficult to synthesize because you may have 3 to 10 amino acids. And it's a matter of picking the right combination of peptides to achieve your end result.
So talking of combinations of peptides, is there ever a case where you can combine peptides and you actually I don't know, cause issues like sensitization or just make it ineffective? Because we're talking about how, context matters when it comes to peptide formulation. You know what I mean? So as much as
Yeah,
there are many of them and they do many things, I mean, are there ever a time where they just, I don't know, interact with each other and become ineffective?
uh, you could uh, that gets back to the objective of the product. So, for instance, if the objective of the product is to reduce fine lines and wrinkles and stimulate native collagen and elastin, I'm going to pick a particular set of peptides that will all interact together to achieve that. Now, I could easily pick another set of peptides and combine them, and they just won't work for that intended purpose, right? So I might get myofascial relaxation if I'm including arginine, but if the other peptides that I'm combining don't support native stimulation of native collagen and elastin production, I'm really not doing anything, am I? I'm
Mm,
just
mm,
relaxing facial muscles. So
mm.
yeah, you can come up with ineffective combinations of peptides.
Mm, mm. Yeah, because I don't think, general public, they hear peptides and they think, ooh, this is great, this is sophisticated, this is anti-aging, but I don't think they understand exactly what peptides as a category are, and what to look for in a peptide formula, because everything has peptides today.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, a consumer will have to do a bit of research
Mm,
to determine if a peptide formula is a good one or not. And then what they'll need to do is, and this information is all readily available, but look at the functional performance of each individual peptide in the formula, and do they all complement one end objective, right? And if they're not all complementing one objective, it's not a well formulated peptide
Yeah,
solution.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Look,
So that requires the consumer to do some research.
look,
Yeah.
as far as the research part of, I know consumers are savvy today and a lot more savvy than they were, say, 10 years ago. But I think there is a limit to what you can expect consumers to, you know what I mean? How much
Yes.
research they're going to do. And then in the end, it just comes down to, it really does come down to the marketing. But, that is definitely a conversation for another day. But let's pivot to another ingredient that everybody loves and also loves to hate. And let's talk about retinol because
Sure.
retinoids as a category are the most proven anti-aging category that we have. But they're also the most confusing because people don't actually understand, like peptides, that retinoids are a category, not a thing. So Mark, can you help walk the audience through the differences between, you're hearing terms like retinol with an A, retinoids broadly, and
Mhm.
retinoic acid, and the differences between those matter.
Yes. Retinol, which is the most prevalent of the retinol series, retinoid series of ingredients in cosmetic products, uh, must undergo a transformation in the skin to retinoic acid. And retinoic acid is the active form. So retinol is becoming a more popular ingredient as opposed to retinol because retinol can convert to retinoic acid in one step in the skin. Retinol requires a two-step conversion to get to retinoic acid. So there are two kind of the development of the retinoid series, the alternatives to retinol have been developed to try to uh, prevent the skin peeling and the negative side effects of retinol itself. But it's actually retinoic acid that is um, having that effect on the skin.
Mm, mm,
And that's why people using retinols need to start at a low dose, a couple of times a week at most, and then kind of build up as their tolerance builds up, their skin acclimates to it. But various retinoids have been developed to try to negate those negative side effects. Now, the more you try to do that, the further away or perhaps the more conversion steps are required, and you lose some efficacy with each conversion step. It's not a 100% conversion. Your best approach in a cosmetic product is to use retinol because there's only one conversion, then retinol, two conversions. And if you're really intolerant to it, then you'll look at the picolinate and various other retinoid alternatives that have been developed.
mm. Yeah, so a lot of people misunderstand retinol in terms of strength, right? Because of this whole idea, the good old retin-A, acne retin-A, right? So it's not really about understanding retinol in terms of strength, but rather how the molecule converts in the skin. Correct?
Mhm.
That's how we need to
Yes,
understand retinol. Okay. So
yes.
you kind of explain that because we need to get rid of that misconception of retinol products are about their strength.
Yeah, it's two factors. The more retinol you have in a product, the more you're going to get into the epidermis, and you'll have more of it converting over to retinoic acid, right? Uh, so that is one factor to consider. The other factor to consider is the form of retinoid that you're including in the product. The initial composition or inclusion rate of that retinoid in the product, depending upon the form, may have a very different end effect in the skin in terms of the quantity converted over into retinoic acid, and having that desired effect on the skin of stimulating cell turnover. So you really can't look at 1% a formula with 1% retinol, one with 1% retinol, 1% hydroxy picolinate. You know what I'm talking about. They will all have different conversion chemistries, and in in concentration of retinoic acid, which is the compound doing the work, right?
Mm, Okay, understood. Understood. All right. So let's talk about another favorite, and another category. And let's talk about antioxidants, because this is the one category that consumers absolutely love, especially vitamin C being our goat, if you don't mind me using a sports analogy.
Mhm.
But
Sure.
antioxidants are also notoriously unstable. So, Mark, from a chemist's perspective, why are antioxidants so difficult to formulate well?
Because they're doing their job in the native state, right? They interact with oxygen. They'll, exposure to light. Uh, um, pH may affect their performance, but basically they're quenching free radicals, and that is the job. And to the extent that you have some free radicals that just exist in nature, maybe some other ingredient in the formula, they're going to do their job and quench. When they quench, of course, they get depleted. So the issue there is including the antioxidants so that they work on the oxygen on the skin, but they're also probably going to do that in the product itself also, in between uses.
Mm,
That's kind of part of the um, challenge of formulating with
mm,
antioxidants.
mm. Absolutely. I mean, it's the whole antioxidant conundrum, because of the fact that, like you said, they're just doing their job. They
Yes.
don't care whether they're doing their job off of your skin or whether they're doing their job in your skin, on your skin. You know what I mean? They're just doing what they're
Yeah.
supposed to be doing.
Or,
So,
or in the bottle. Yes.
yeah. So that brings me to the topic of packaging, because antioxidants, being as unstable as they are affected by things like air exposure, formulation
Mhm.
design, but packaging is one of those situations that matters most when it comes to things like vitamin C. And I talk about it ad nauseum, how packaging is not about a pretty design, it's not about an afterthought. Packaging should be part of product integrity. It should be the conversation that people are having at the R&D level, because you know what I mean? You can't, especially with antioxidants, you can't have packaging become an afterthought, right? You need to,
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
needs to be a part of the formula. Vitamin C specifically, it isn't just fighting biology. Like you said, it's doing its job. It's fighting air exposure, light exposure, heat, and time. So, so Mark,
Yes.
from your point of view as a formulator, how much does packaging determine whether an antioxidant specific product is still active months later? Talking again of the fact that it's going to continue doing its job in its container.
Yes. I mean, the best approach with packaging is to use opaque airless pumps. So your product will not be exposed to light. With the airless system, you're going to minimize exposure to oxygen, etc. So you'll minimize the natural degradation of the ingredients in a formula. So that is your best approach. The other advantage of an airless pump type of packaging is it aids your preservation system. The consumer's hands do not come in touch with the contact with the bulk of the product in the packaging, right? So it's dispensed on the skin. There's no, minimal opportunity for microbial contamination that way.
Mm,
So that packaging really needs to be at the forefront of your thought process in terms of the type of product that you're developing.
mm, mm.
What is the best packaging for that format?
No.
So,
Uh-huh.
I'm going through that right now with a client with a copper tripeptide serum, for
Mm,
instance.
mm,
The initial selection was an airless pump, good, but clear, and it's because the deep blue cobalt color is really pretty and it looks good in the container. However, you have issues there with exposure to light, for instance.
mm.
So that's going to affect the shelf life of the product, and it will gradually fade over time as the copper tripeptide depletes due to sunlight exposure,
Mm.
or just light exposure. So that product's likely to change over time, and you really don't want consumers observing that that kind of change. So you do everything you can to minimize it, right?
Yeah. No, look, I mean, I've
So yeah,
seen,
it's
yeah, go
it's a
ahead. Sorry. There was a
no.
delay. Go
I mean,
ahead.
packaging is a critical component of the formula of the development of the product. You've
Mhm,
got to bring
mhm,
that in right up front.
mhm. And Mark, I don't know whether you agree with this or not, but I think for me, one of the most costly mistakes that I see brands make is not having a packaging discussion right there in the R&D process, right? Because packaging options
Yes.
are endless, right? You get
Yeah.
uh, clear bottles, and you have issues with oxidation, like you just said. You got jars and air exposure, droppers and
Yeah.
contamination. And the thing is that people look at the packaging as aesthetics instead of as chemistry.
Yes.
You know what I mean? As part of, like you
Yeah.
said, the formula. And that's just something I just try to drum home as much as I possibly can. Packaging is not just an engineering conversation. Packaging needs to be
Hmm.
part of the chemistry conversation. So I don't know if you want to react to that.
Yes. Yeah, because I mean it's rare, but you can have packaging incompatibilities with a particular product, depending upon the packaging you're selecting. Uh, that can have some impact on the viscosity of the product, so that it pumps properly, right? So you don't want to get all the way down to the point where you've approved a formula to find out that it won't work in the packaging.
Mm, mm,
That really needs to be part of the development process.
oh,
So if it's something simple like you're going to use a Boston round with a dropper, an eyedropper, well, that's a very forgiving type of packaging. But if you're going to get into things with pumps, they're not so forgiving. So you
mm,
have to develop in with the packaging in mind to make sure that you're properly formulating the product.
No, 100%. And it's like I said, it's a point I just try to drive home with founders and investors all the time, for them to really internalize that packaging can't be an afterthought. You know what I mean? It can't be the last conversation you have, like you said, once your formula's done, once you've signed off on it and you've approved
Yes.
it. You know what I mean? And then only then are you thinking, oh, maybe we should go look at some pretty packaging. It has to be a part of the R&D and conversation from day one. Because, like you said, it
Yes.
determines stability, shelf life, efficacy, and, your claims have to hold up over time. And
Yes.
something as simple as packaging can all of a sudden become extremely costly when you realize, even just from an engineering standpoint, you know what I mean, that it's not just a container. You know what I mean? This is a part of the entire system,
Correct.
and that
Yeah,
becomes even
it's
more
part of it.
important. Yeah, yeah, as we start talking about the ingredients that we're about to unpack now, things like, collagen, which we talked about earlier, but now I really want to dive into collagen. So
Mhm.
before we start talking about the more biotechy, futuristic ingredients, I do want to just touch on collagen again, because it is one of the most commercially powerful words in skincare. And it has immediate consumer appeal because people understand that collagen, within the context of skin science matters, right? So collagen is
Yes.
understood, and we talked about this, but I'm just for clarity, I'm going to kind of sort of repeat, what we've already spoken a
Yeah.
bit about. It's understood as structural, youth, firmness. So when consumers see collagen cream or collagen serum, written on a product label, they automatically assume youth. This must be rebuilding what I'm losing, right? That's the usual misconception with collagen. But
Yes.
but Mark,
Yes.
from a science perspective, what can collagen realistically do? I know we've spoken about what it is, and we've spoken about, you know what I mean. But from a skin science, topical collagen can realistically do what? Because I know what it can't do, but what
Uh,
does
it, it,
topical in reality?
it can realistically hydrolyze and degrade on the surface of the skin. As yet,
Right,
it is not going to do anything
right. So this is
regarding
why,
longevity, anti-aging, and
yeah.
yeah, reinforcing the extracellular matrix. It will not do any of that.
Okay, and this is why I love collagen as a case study because topical collagen products, they feel incredible. Like when you actually put them on your skin and you use them, they feel plush and cushioning and
Mhm.
smoothing. And for the most part, that feel happens instantly, right? But
Mhm.
the marketing claims, from the consumer standpoint, they feel true because the experience feels true, right? And you know what I mean by that,
Mhm.
from a formulator
Yeah. Yeah.
standpoint. Okay, so let's explain to the audience who are new to beauty. Why is this? Because topical collagen products create that immediate sensory payoff, even when they're structurally not doing a thing. They're not changing anything in the dermis. They
Mm.
actually have, they're not doing anything. They're not replacing collagen. They're not rebuilding dermal scaffolding. They're not, they have no function other than as a film former. So, let's talk a bit about that. And then, couple that, Mark, with what is the real moisturizing benefit that is coming. It's got to come from the supporting ingredients. It's certainly not coming from the topical collagen.
Yeah, it's from the supporting ingredients. So in that context, collagen is what you would call a label ingredient, right? Consumers are familiar with it. They associate collagen with the extracellular matrix and anti-aging and wrinkle reduction and everything else. Um, So you can formulate uh, a collagen cream, for instance, formulating a collagen product. And, collagen's a shorthand, like you said, to consumers for, anti-aging, beauty, etc., skin firmness. Uh, there's nothing wrong with collagen or a hydrolyzed collagen, whether there's even biotech collagen uh, um, in a product uh, as a label ingredient. But if you want the collagen cream to work, you're going to need to include niacinamide, copper tripeptide, tripeptide 29, those ingredients that actually stimulate native collagen and elastin production. The collagen itself won't do anything. It won't get incorporated into the native collagen. It won't even penetrate the epidermis. So that is a way of formulating a product using a label ingredient that consumers relate to, but then underline use the ingredients that are actually going to interact with the biology to build collagen and elastin. Those products that contain just the collagen, the various types of collagen, are highly unlikely to actually do anything to improve the texture or firmness of the skin.
Okay, so
Now,
what you're basically
now they can be
saying,
properly, yeah, basically junk in a jar. Um, now, if they're properly formulated and collagen is included in it, well, yeah, they can work, right? But collagen itself not going to do anything.
okay. So let's be nice and not say junk in a jar. Let's just call it hope in a jar. Because because that's at
Hope
least
in a jar.
it's hope in a jar, not junk. But
There you
anyway,
go.
so so collagen, look, it's an easy buzzword to build a product story around because it's emotionally persuasive. And besides, it
Yes.
physically, sensorially, it feels good on the skin. But the
Yeah.
diligence question for investors is, are you selling performance or are you selling a sensory experience? Because that's not the same thing. For founders,
No.
yeah, collagen is a reminder that you can't formulate around a headline. For investors, the strongest
Yeah.
claims are often the ones that deserve the most scrutiny. So in skincare, and Mark, you can react to this, but the molecule that sounds most powerful is not always the molecule doing the work. And this is where diligence matters, because when brands use drug adjacent language, the science, the claims, and the regulatory exposure all tighten. And topical collagen specifically is one of the most successful examples of skincare marketing borrowing from human biology. Now, as we move
Yes.
into the final ingredient segment here, the gap between scientific complexity and marketing language is just about to get really wide. All right, so Mark, let's
Hmm.
do this. Let's talk about my absolute favorite here, growth factors and exosomes, because some of the most misunderstood ingredients in modern skincare, and largely it's because of the language around them, the misunderstandings come because they sound medical. But as we know, these ingredients are also just a marketing dream. That's it. They're a dream. They're hope in a bottle. They sound advanced, futuristic, biotechy. Consumers hear things like growth factor and assume it means, they're going to grow healthy new skin. I'm not sure what they think it's going to do. But in reality, these are complex, they're fragile, they're often plant, but plant based materials. So from formulation, let's just talk formulation a second. The category for our non-scientific audience, Mark, let's just break it down. So growth factors and exosomes. What are we actually talking about when we're talking about these terms in terms of skin science?
hmm Growth factors, or I'll start off there, are molecules that will stimulate cellular turnover. So, for instance, it's similar to retinol, kind of same mechanism of action. Now, there is one company, and I use their ingredient quite a bit, Core Biogenesis, um, out of France, that have developed growth factors fused to oleosomes. And the oleosomes are the delivery vehicle to drive the growth factor into the skin. They have completed clinical studies that prove that their growth factors are as if more effective than retinol without any of the side effects. Okay. So that's the one company in the growth factor arena that has done a good job of documenting their efficacy. Okay. Uh, on the other side, uh, exosomes are small packets, extracellular packets that contain signaling molecules that will direct the cells to do certain things. But exosomes are not stable at room temperature. So, for instance, when you see all of these really good results from use of exosomes, those are done in clinic via microneedling, right? The application is via microneedling. So you've got, storage of the exosomes. They're generally, pretty pure, not formulated into a product, and they're applied to drive them into the skin with microneedles. Exosomes in a cosmetic product that someone can buy off of a website or in a store. One, when you open the bottle, there won't be any exosomes left in that bottle. They're just not heat stable. So they're going to, they'll naturally degrade. Um, so they're very expensive to buy and not worth the investment. If you want to use exosomes in your skincare regimen, go to a dermatologist and have a microneedling session in clinic. Um, but yeah, the theory of exosomes is they contain the packets of signaling molecules that will direct the cells to undertake certain functions. Uh, they do have the aura of being highly advanced and highly scientific, etc. But that's only under very controlled conditions, which you're not going to get in a cosmetic product in a drawer that you can buy off a website.
So what we're basically saying is once again, skincare marketing is just loose lips, you know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
lots of
correct.
hope in the bottle. And talking of hope in a bottle, when a consumer picks up a product that claims it contains growth factors, you know, I know we understand what they imagine they're getting, but in reality, what are they getting? Nothing?
Well, some growth factors can possibly have some effect on the skin. Again, it all depends upon the clinical bag and behind the ingredient. So for a consumer, you're not going to know that. So I wouldn't get too enamored of growth factors as a marketing term or exosomes as a marketing term, because you don't necessarily have proof of concept there, right? Like I said, the one company that I do know has a growth factor proof of concept is Core Biogenesis. Uh, the others, I haven't seen that much.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
it's they're labeled for the most part label and marketing ingredients.
Mm, mm, mm. Okay, so let's add another layer of confusion to this and talk about stem cells. Okay, because stem cells and growth factors are often marketed in the same products. But when we talk
Yes,
about stem cells, we're not talking about in skincare anyway. We're not talking about human stem cells. We're talking about plant
correct,
derived. And plant materials don't
correct.
behave like human tissue. You know what I mean? We're not the same biology. Plant cells, I don't think they can signal skin cells, at least not the way consumers believe or are led to believe that they do. So staying in the
Yes.
chemistry lane, Mark, what are the practical I can't speak. What are the practical limitations here when these ingredients are plant-based extracts rather than human biological signaling molecules?
Yeah, I'm very skeptical of that for exactly the reason you brought up, and that is, a plant DNA. There's no reason to believe that plant DNA would activate human biological processes. I mean, it's just kind of nonsense. The other issue is on uh, stem cells. Getting back to stem cells, people think that stem cells related to what they've seen in terms of technology of regrowing in the ear and stuff like that. Human stem cells. Uh, Stem cells are a bit of a sleight of hand in the cosmetic industry, because what they don't tell you is those are the factories to produce the end ingredient, right? So it's not stem cells that interact with the human biology. It's stem cells as a biochemical factory, right? And they're engineered to then produce a particular ingredient, right, as the outcome. So that whole thing, to me, I just avoid them altogether because I of those two considerations. One, they're just factories, and two, they're not human derived. So these are things that are kind of marketing ploys for
Absolutely.
consumers. Um, yeah, they're just marketing ploys for consumers, and they end up being label ingredients.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And look, I mean, irrespective of their source, right? They're still fragile biological compounds. You know what I mean? And so from a
Mhm.
formulation perspective, I would imagine there would be challenges with stability, preservation, delivery, obviously. And so like you say, you try to avoid them. I think they're what's the point? But they're out
Yeah,
there. And it's important that founders and investors understand that if you're about to put money, behind a product that is, vested heavily in their stem cells, you've got to understand what we're talking about here. Like the reality of it, because
yes,
the marketing can always sound wonderful. The marketing, you know what I mean? Like we said,
yes,
our hope in a jar. So, in cases like this where you hear things like growth factors and stem cells and you know what I mean, consumer imagination runs far ahead of what the cosmetic
yes,
reality is.
yes,
And exosomes fall into the similar category. They're scientifically interesting, right? But commercially, they're completely and utterly misunderstood. And it's not to say that they're necessarily fake, but the interpretation of their efficacy often sounds magical. So, for founders and investors watching and listening, the diligence questions around key ingredients should be what exactly is the ingredient? What form is it
hmm
in? What evidence supports the cosmetic claim? And is the marketing borrowing medical meaning that the product cannot and will not ever deliver? Because when the language becomes regenerative, the regulatory scrutiny is going to tighten. All right, so closing,
Yes.
Mark. Okay, this is the core takeaway from our conversation today. Skincare is not about ingredient headlines. It's about formulation architecture, the skin barrier, right? The formulation delivery system, and the ingredients interaction effects. And the difference between a product that performs and a product that is just marketing the chemistry often comes down to the quality of the formulator behind it. For founders, like with packaging, choosing a formulator is not an aesthetic decision. It's a performance decision, a safety decision, and a credibility decision. For investors, this is your diligence signal. But before we close out, I want to offer a final piece of advice, just practical advice for viewers. Because this entire conversation really led to that one core business reality I just mentioned, your choice of formulator is one of the highest leverage decisions you're going to make as a brand. So, with all of that, Mark, and as a formulator, before we go, I want to ask you, how should founders choose a formulator and how should investors diligence one?
Yeah, uh, the way a founder should go about looking at formulators, that's a kind of a short term, very important relationship because your choice of formulator is, depending upon their skill set, going to determine the quality of your formula, the outcome of your formula. So the first consideration is look at their product portfolio of products that they have developed. Look at how well those products have performed in the marketplace. Do your reference checking with past clients, and make yourself comfortable that the formulator will be able to deliver high quality, high performance products. Uh, Query them about delivery systems. Query them about the ingredients getting into past the epidermis and in interacting with the skin biology. And then chemistry. Is this someone that I would enjoy working with? So for founders that don't have deep technical knowledge, and they're looking at formulators, put together a target list of 3 to 5 formulators, talk to some other founders, get some recommendations on who to contact to consider working with. And if you need to, if you have a non-formulating technical consultant that can help you query the formulator, go through your due diligence on the formulator, that could be very helpful. Same thing with investors. It's kind of the same discussion. You're looking for validating the track record, validating the products that are out in the marketplace, the success rate, the products out in the marketplace, and that will help you get down to making a final decision as to who you want to work with and who you want to engage. So that is the best way to go about it.
No, absolutely. And again, I'm always saying, don't find somebody just because they say yes to everything you ask for. If find somebody who's going to push back, because there's oftentimes
Yeah,
where you have this pie in the sky idea of what you think you're creating, when in actual fact, it's a whole big nothing burger. So, have somebody who can at least guide you in the right direction. Because formulation quality is execution risk, right? And talking of execution risk, Mark, one last thing from a perspective in from an investor's perspective. Um, when if they were looking to or they were evaluating an active lead skincare brand, right? The hero ingredient lead skincare brand. What
Yeah.
formulation diligence questions should they be asking behind the scenes?
Oh, what are you going to do to support it? So if they're marketing, it's a hero ingredient based marketing approach. The most important thing is to inquire about supporting cast ingredients to making sure that your product is actually a system that is going to work. That and the formula architecture, as we discussed earlier, and the biological pathways, and making sure you've got the right ingredients that complement one another, right? Because no one ingredient does everything. It performs its role, and it's a hero ingredient because the name is known, right? Consumers are aware of it, but that in and of itself does not guarantee you're going to have a high performance product.
And the final question I'm going to throw at you before we end here is technical red flags. What would you tell a brand selling a narrative rather than infrastructure?
Oh, well, if you're selling a narrative, you're running the risk that your product is not going to perform and won't have longevity in the marketplace. So that, in my opinion, is a very risky strategy. I'd much rather go with a focus on formula architecture, delivery, and performance. Because at the end of the day, a consumer might be enticed to try a product, marketing based on a hero ingredient. But if it doesn't work, they've got thousands of other options. They'll just move on to something else that they think might work.
Mm,
So
mm,
that's a very faulty and risky approach for any brand.
yeah.
You got to really focus on performance and art.
Mm, mm, mm. No, I couldn't agree with you more, Mark. I couldn't agree. And, our conversation today has such an important takeaway, which is that in beauty, the ingredient is rarely the differentiator. The differentiator is whether the
Yes.
product is engineered to work, whether it's
Yep.
engineered to last and to scale. In other words, the
Yes.
formulator isn't just another vendor. They're your strategic partner. For founders,
Yes.
your core should be performance, like Mark just said. For investors, diligence. But for consumers, it's trust. And Mark,
Yes.
that's our conversation for today. So thank you again for taking the time to talk to me. I always love speaking to you. It's always such a pleasure. You make complex so understandable, and thank you for being here. For those watching and listening, if you're building, investing, or evaluating beauty, understanding formulation is understanding risk. If you found this video valuable, like it, share it, and subscribe here on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow me on LinkedIn, where I share more expert insights on the issues and answers that drive smarter beauty investment. I'm Melory Johnson. Thank you for watching and listening, and I will see you all next week.